Good morning and thank you, Dr. Preetham, for giving this opportunity. Basically, since this course talks mainly on the use of slit lamp, I will be talking a little less on gonioscopy, other things. Basically, we do gonioscopy to visualize the anterior segment angle, which we are not able to see directly in the slit lamp. We require an added lens to be used because the angle is not visible because of total internal reflection. And the main use, because the first step is to differentiate between open angle and narrow angle, and there are other differences because of the diseases being different. So you need to know whether it's open angle or closed angle, and you have to determine the site of the occlusal impedance, mechanism responsible for the glaucoma, and it has to be repeated periodically during the course of the disease, that is during the lifetime of the patient. So when are you going to do a gonioscopy as a procedure when you examine the patient? First is when you see a patient with a suspiciously shallow angle, you can do the Van Herring test. Then basically in hyperopes, you can put the beam on the side and see if the peripheral angle and the thickness of the cornea on the optical section which Dr. Nayak showed us, and see if it is less than 1/4, then that means the Van Herring is positive. Glaucoma suspects based on disc and IOP, iris abnormalities which you see, pigment dispersion, pseudo-exfoliation, suspected retained foreign bodies when you have injuries, and especially penetrating injuries, and patient complaints of pain suggestive of intermittent angle closure, and ophthalmic examination for headache, which we all do a lot. We should do gonioscopy with that. And then when you see, as I said, you just examine on a routine slit lamp, you see these kind of iris abnormalities, and it's time to put in a gonioscope, and you might see the reason why it is there. Post-operatively, after you have done a routine cataract surgery, if you find elevated pressure, unexplained uveitis or uveitis, why the patient is getting uveitis after a very uneventful phaco mask application. Now you see a peak pupil which you don't expect it to, or after you have put an anterior chamber lens. Even prior to certain procedures, especially phakic IOLs, endothelial transplantations, you need to see if the angle, these are not glaucoma situations, but still you need to do gonioscopy. Gonioscopy is basically done in two ways depending on the type of lenses you use. The one is the one which we need coupling agents. The Goldman's lens is the most popular lens in this category. And the second one is which we do not need to put coupling agents. The Zeiss, the Posner, the Sussman, these are all the lenses which fall in this category. And basically this is the technique by which we can do indentation gonioscopy, which I plan to show you. So this is the Sussman 4 mirror, this is the Posner 4 mirror, this is the Zeiss 4 mirror, and these are very easily available now in our country, and you can easily use them. Requirements for doing gonioscopic examination: basically you need a good slit lamp, and you need topical anesthetic and coupling agent if you are using one of the lenses which requires a coupling agent. You have the goniosol which is available. Basically you require a viscous fluid which you need to put on the lens when you want to do the gonioscopy. You have to place the patient onto the slit lamp comfortably, yourself also being comfortable. Before you do gonioscopy or even plan to do gonioscopy, you have to make sure that your room can be darkened. Nowadays, many times I have seen in places, the room is not dark enough, then you are not going to be able to do gonioscopy very accurately and detect narrow angles. You will miss quite a few narrow angles if your room is not dark enough. So room darkening is very important. And then you have to make the patient sit very comfortably and try to tell the patient what you are going to do, because if you just take a lens and jab it into somebody's eyes, he's going to feel it very uncomfortable. So you have to tell the patient that I am going to do a small test in which I am going to put a contact lens in your eye. If you say contact lens, because everybody has heard of it, and their anxiety levels don't go up so much. So what you need to do is ask the patient to look straight. Then you need to lift the upper eyelid, and then ask the patient to look upwards, and you tilt the lens first. Before inserting, you let the lens be tilted like that so that the inferior edge touches first, and then put the lens straight up like that. If you try to just push it in straight, you are not going to get cooperation from the patient. Even when you want to put a lens which does not have a coupling agent, these are easier to put in the eye because their basic aperture here, the touching part is smaller than the corneal diameter. So you can very easily put it. Most of the time you don't need to hold the upper lid, but you can if you want to, or you can ask your assistant to do it also. But I would recommend that it should not be held as far as possible. Then this is the first view you get when the lens is in place. This is just to make sure that your lens is properly abutting onto the cornea. After that, what you need to know is the gonioscopic anatomy. As far as the slit lamp settings are concerned, you should have a darkened room. The slit beam has to be at an angle, roughly about 45 degrees angle, and you have to put a parallelepiped kind of thing, so 2 millimeters beam, but the height has to be less. You should make sure that when the beam is put onto the gonioscopic lens, it does not impinge on the pupil. When you start looking at the angle, I'm going to show you slides again. Most important is that you start from the corneal end and go backwards rather than go the other way. Because from the other way, how much you are going to see is going to be variable depending on narrow angle, open angle, or very widely open angle. Cornea is always visible. So start from what is always there and go backwards to the level you can see, starting with cornea, Schwalbe baseline, the anterior non-pigmented trabecular meshwork, the filtering posterior pigmented trabecular meshwork, the scleral spur, ciliary body band, and then the iris root. So this is the way you need to start seeing from here and start going backwards like this. This is not the ideal beam, but just for photography purpose, I have made it very wide so that you can see the same thing which I pointed out over here. This is the cornea, and then you have to go backwards from here. So you will then see the Schwalbe line, and then you will see the non-pigmented, then the pigmented trabecular meshwork, scleral spur, and this is the ciliary body and the iris root. That is another photograph of the same thing, all pointed out for you. So you should familiarize yourself with this picture. The best thing to do is to pick up patients who have already been operated for cataracts. Usually they have deep anterior chambers, and you will be able to study these very well. So for people who are starting into ophthalmic practice and take first 25 patients of cataract operated and put in a gonioscope, you will be able to study this quite well in those patients. The next thing you want to know after you have seen the angle structure is whether the angle is occludable, and second is, are there any abnormalities in the angle. So when you want to look for occludability, your testing conditions have to be very strict. Patient has to be looking straight ahead. Try to make the patient fix with the eye which you are not examining. Room lights has to be dimmed to the maximum extent. Dark is the best. Decrease the illumination height of the slit beam and make it wide. Width should be around 2 millimeters. And then you have to look in the angle, making sure that your beam is not impinging on the pupil. As you can see in this picture, this beam is slightly impinging on the pupil. If it's short somewhere here, that will be superior. This is what is called the parallelepiped appearance, where you see this is the cornea. You will see two reflections in the corneal part. One is from the epithelial side and one is from the endothelial side. When you reach the Schwalbe line, the cornea does not remain transparent anymore at that level, and therefore this beam fuses with the inner beam, and this is the collapsing of the parallelepiped, and that is the position and you see the Schwalbe line. Then you can trace backwards and you will see non-pigmented trabecular meshwork, pigmented trabecular meshwork, Schwalbe line, and ciliary body. So this is the way to identify the Schwalbe line. And then you have to give a little thought onto the peripheral iris, whether it is bulging forward, whether it is straight, or whether it is concave. So this is for doing the grading of the angles, which I am not going to go so much into detail. When you want to look at abnormalities in the angle, you want to artificially open the angle to the maximum level it can. So what you do is keep, like patient keeps looking straight, but increase the room light, increase the beam also. So the pupil will constrict a little bit and you will get more opening of the angle and you will be able to visualize things much better. After you have done this, you want to do an indentation examination. Indentation can only be done with lenses which have got the corneal, the curvature, posterior curvature of that lens has to be flatter than the curvature of the cornea. Then only it can do indentation. It is difficult to hold this lens in position because of the curvature being less. It does not stick onto the cornea like the Goldmann lens. So you have to make a little effort to keep it in position. So it has to be kept in the central cornea without any artificial pressure on it. And this is what you do when you want to do indentation. You push the lens backwards and artificially this angle will open. And as I pointed out, the total diameter of this lens has to be less than the diameter of the cornea. Well, in the Goldman lens, the cornea, the diameter of the lens is larger than the diameter of the cornea. So this is what you see. Again, in this I made the beam a little wider than we usually do because I wanted to let people see it. Now I have to get this video to run. So you can see that you put the pressure, keep looking here, and you will see that when you put pressure there, you can see the iris moved completely away, an angle which was totally closed completely opened. For those who want to see it again, there when you put pressure, the iris moved back and this angle you can see completely becomes visible. So you know that there are no synechiae there. That is the purpose of the indentation. This is the patient is looking exactly straight. The angle, the lens does not move at all. You just move it backwards and you see the full angle opening. Here you can't see any angle. The picture is ending at the Schwalbe's line. Once you give, you can see the anterior non-pigmented as well as the posterior pigmented trabecular meshwork, and over here you can even see the scleral spot. So completely open an angle on indentation. And so in other cases, when you do the indentation, you will see that the angle does not completely open, and in some places you can see this painting synechiae kind of thing has formed. So in this way, you are going to be able to differentiate synechial angle closure from completely appositional angle closure, which you cannot do by any other technique, including the imaging techniques. Then the next step is sometimes the angle looks closed in the primary position because the iris is excessively bulging forwards, and you need to look what we call over the hill. You need to look over the iris to see if the angle is open. This can only be done by manipulating the lens. And you can see in this video that you have to make the person's eye move towards the mirror, or the mirror has to be moved towards the direction of the. You can see over here that once it is being tilted, the lens is being tilted, and there the full angle is become visible. As compared to the original position where only the Schwalbe's line was visible. You have to see over there, and that is the lens has come out. Then there are these kind of abnormalities which you see. Sometimes you can be mistaking this kind of appearance for synechiae, but this is just the iris processes. They look much more finer. The synechiae will be more tinted. So these are just lacy iris processes. I think that's the end. That's a little. My time is over, so I'm just going to show it just through some examples. But otherwise, thank you very much.